Now, I've been a long-time viewer of Narcs even before he started blowing up thanks to Asmongold. But I wanted to respond to another one of his videos. This will be the second time I respond to Narc. And this time I want to talk about the video that has the two titles, the one in the thumbnail and the one that's actually written out. The one on the thumbnail is Graphics Don't Matter. And the actually written out one is Ashes of Creation is making huge progress, but where is the gameplay? So he does a pretty good job of addressing what it is that makes graphics important to catch people's attention, to demonstrate that the project is high quality. This is something that's really important. If you see a project that might be fun, might not be fun, but the graphics are just not there, it might take you a very long time to become interested and give that project your attention and a chance. Obviously, the world of an MMORPG has to be immersive. It has to transport you to some place. It doesn't mean that the graphics have to be photorealistic, as Narc mentions, but if the graphics are pleasant to the eye, it's obviously going to help. Now, Steven himself addresses this. Narc has this quote by Steven.
Graphics don't make a game fun. Systems make games fun, but graphics make those systems far more enjoyable.
And it's true. The welcome mat is the graphics, then you come through the door and you stay for the systems, right? For the fun. But I've often talked about in my videos the two different distinct portions of systems that add up to long-term fun in MMORPGs and actually all games. And I want to start with the second this time, because the second is the one that seemingly is absolutely nailed time and time again by Ashes of Creation, and that's the B. The B is the thing that gives the value to the interactions in the game and the world itself. It can come from player interactions, it can come from complex systems that just make whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is that you've accomplished, valuable within the world. So you have this enduring quality. It's the reason that people want to pay as much as an economic vehicle for a flying mount in World of Warcraft. There was times where that happened. But the A part of the game, which is really where most games derive most of their value, is the simple fun of playing the game. That means how much fun is it to actually play the game, slay the boar. I've mentioned before that Blizzard took the approach of creating Goldshire, it doesn't have to be Goldshire, it can just be a sandbox. And you're just inside of that sandbox, and not a sandbox MMO. I mean, literally just a little box of sand. It could be a gray space where you're just killing a boar until the act of killing that boar is fun. Now, with a lot of modern games, like let's just say something like New World, which I've been playing recently, the gameplay's fun. There's times in which I'm shooting my bow and arrow. It's just like the fun of an FPS. And then there's the fun of almost an Elden Ring type thing when you pull out your melee weapon. So MMOs can be fun now to actually play. This is kind of the novelty that we're moving into. And I think that Ashes of Creation, with the changes that they seem to be making, is taking that into account and making sure that the game is going to be fun to play. However, that brings us to my greatest concern for Ashes of Creation, and it has been since basically I got educated. We are very far along in the development of the game, hopefully, but we haven't really seen a focus on the gameplay of Ashes of Creation. It just sort of strikes me as though it's being treated as an afterthought, like the real passion behind Ashes of Creation is really in those systems and not really in the gameplay. Now, this is a novel approach to say the least, and may just be what's coming natural to Steven and the team, and it could turn out to be just fine. But normally if I said, I'm leading with the gameplay, I'm going to make sure that the game is fun, then we're going to build all these systems to generate the B value of the game. But first comes the A value of the game. The B value systems are informed by the A value. That means like if it's fun to play as an FPS, then the systems should take into account that most people will be playing as an FPS. If it's not fun to play as the FPS because maybe, back in like tabula rasa days or something like that, where you're kind of faking it, like you have to sort of have your reticle on the target and all this sort of stuff, it may not add up to fun. So you are actually going to want to pivot and move into making sure that the crafting systems, that all of these other things that are not the FPS-like elements, you can even think of something probably not many people know about tabula rasa. You can look that up if you would like. It's a Richard Garriott MMO that was not very long-lived. But let's talk about something like Fallout. There's a lot of people that play Fallout with the VAT system. I refuse. I play it as an FPS ever since it, of course, turned into an FPS-like game. I've just been playing it as an FPS because I'm a very big FPS fan, despite having been a fan of Fallout even before it went 3D. So I play it as an FPS. And as I do that, it's good enough for me to have fun, but it isn't as good as it could be if that was the entire purpose of the game. All of the systems, and I'm not just talking about like economies and things like that, I'm talking about the way the game is programmed is informed by what the fun is. Ashes of Creation has had the goal of having big siege-like battles with huge servers and lots of people since day one. And just to be clear, they've got developers like, I believe his last name is McPherson from PlanetSide, who've done things like this before. And it might be, honestly, that the initial conception was to push towards something like a more action-based system, as we are starting to see now. I hope that we'll see a lot more of it in the next update. But they may just not have had the confidence in the technology to push it there. Obviously, if you got people from PlanetSide, that's going to be something that's really going to help push it towards a more action-y sort of thing, because you need that sort of precision in your netcode if you're doing an FPS. And really quickly, I wanted to mention another project called Dreamworld, which you may or may not be familiar with. But this is an MMO world that is supposed to be focused more on creative, building, stuff like that. And they allege that they're going to have one mega server with like millions of people in it, all creating stuff and building things in the world. And people constantly say, well, if you could just have that technology, you could just sell that for millions. Why do you need to go crowdsource it and have such a small team? Just create that technology, sell it for millions, like rent it out for millions to all these companies, and then you can just make whatever project you want because you'll be super rich. That's not exactly how optimization for netcode works. Optimization for netcode, it's optimized towards the end goal. In the case of something like Dreamworld, it may be that you don't need to have very high fidelity positioning and very quick updates for everyone, because you don't need that level of accuracy. People are just building buildings over time. You can do with a lot of prediction and smoothing, because I never have to hit a guy and make sure that I hit him in the head or in the arm or something like that. I don't need their position to be super accurate. So you actually can send much less information, much less often, and therefore have a lot more people connected if that's what you're doing. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in netcode when you need accuracy. But unfortunately, that is what you actually do need when you're going towards action gameplay. And so as Ashes of Creation sort of migrates towards action gameplay, it's going to put a much higher difficulty cap on their netcode goals. But that's only concern number one. Concern number two is that throughout all of the process that we've seen beautiful graphics. Again, art team, absolutely great. I love everything that I see out of it. It just manages to hit that level of quality, but with personality. That's just really hard to achieve as an artist. And the systems are absolutely number one. Steven and his responses, number one. You know, the best in the business, basically. It's the things that make you actually care about Ashes of Creation even before it exists, right? But the thing we don't hear very much of, and I honestly never heard at the beginning, was what is the envisioning of actually playing the game going to be like? What is the fun of killing the boar? What is it? I mean, yes, we're going to see now that on top of everything that they've built, they're going to now have classes with gameplay. But this is, at least to be clear, a fairly unorthodox approach, and the reason that people are concerned. I think that a lot of times, obviously there's some people that are just going to say, graphics don't matter, I'll still play, and I do, play EverQuest, and I still enjoy it, you know. I know graphics matter. I also make video games, and I know that if I make something that looks bad, people let me know that it looks bad. Even if it doesn't look bad, but it just doesn't look like what they like, you're going to hear about it. So the more that you can catch people's attention with art, the better. But at the end of the day, it is gameplay that is king, and we have not really seen that be the focus. I'm talking about actual gameplay, not the systems that are around gameplay, but the one-to-one, how do we fight, has never been the focus, the primary focus of Ashes of Creation. That is, I think, the concern. And yes, of course, it has nothing to do with the fact that graphics are being developed and that you can show graphics, and graphics are obviously going to be eye candy. That is in their nature to be. But where is the gameplay is actually a very legitimate question, and one that we will hopefully have answered in the very near future. It is basically, in my book, at square one. We are literally seeing the very first glimpses of what the actual game is going to be like just now. We've seen, of course, the little glimpses of the latest fighting mechanics and all that, but we're going to start seeing what the classes are really like. What ranged class, maybe, I don't know, rangers. People constantly think that rangers mean that you have to have range. It means rangers like home on the range. So you can just be a sort of scout with swords, think Strider, right? But people think Legolas. So I'm sure it'll be something like that. Of course, I like using bow and arrows. I like ranged classes. I'd love to see some ranged combat and to see if it's going to be like something like New World or even Tower of Fantasy, which is semi-FPS, or if it's going to be more targeted. At the end of the day, since this is a PvP-driven game or more PvP-centric, I know it's called PvX typically because there's kind of both happening at the same time, the way that the netcode interacts with the style of gameplay that you're going to actually be experiencing is going to be very important, because you just don't want to have the feeling of everything being janky or unfair because this guy's a faster connection, or both sides just feeling like the combat is sort of muddy. That's not going to make for much fun. So it is a concern, and it's a valid concern that will hopefully be addressed soon. So that is why I believe Narc kind of missed the mark with his most recent video. I know he's been self-admittedly like struggling for content. I can understand that. And to be clear, I think that all of the arguments that he made were pretty much on the mark, but he just kind of missed what the actual core problem was. Now, I'm not sure if he's hearing from a lot of people that Ashes is only putting out graphics and pretty images and models that you can buy ahead of time. That might be something he's hearing. I'm not personally hearing that because nobody really talks to me. But I think that it is ultimately a legitimate concern. This is like you've met a girl. She's a really nice girl. She's very pretty. You get along really well. She likes your humor. She's a fan of the way you dress and eats the same things you eat and even watches some of the same shows you watch. But you don't know if there's going to be any physical chemistry between you, and you're about to find that out. And I think that it's where a lot of gamers are now finding themselves. Let's hope that we get along. So let me know what you think. Are you concerned about the way that the gameplay and the net code and all this is going to interact? Why hasn't there been more focus on discussing like what's important about the feeling of playing a game, not just the systems of the economy and the politics around it? Is that not important? I find it to be important. I know that it will ultimately prove to be important, and we will see how that plays out very soon. So please stay tuned, because I will definitely be giving my feedback on the Ranger class, if that is indeed what happens in the September update. So like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.
But little did the audience know, Narc doesn't actually give a shit.